Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Overwatch Lately. We got a little bit of a change of scenery here. Skype has decided to continue its ways of being awful, and so I have to change computers here. So we're going to have a different environment. But first and foremost, one of my favorite people ever in the Overwatch community is joining me today. We have Noukky, team manager extraordinaire, working with Cloud9, has been a part of the Overwatch world and scene literally since its infancy, has worked plenty of different roles. Noukky, how's it going today?
Thanks for having me, Boop. It's going pretty fine. As you see, we have pretty nice weather here in LA, so I'm sitting outside, enjoying life.
That's great. You might be the first person that I've ever interviewed who has gone outside that day, determining on the people that I have. But why don't we take a second to introduce yourself, to tell the people who are watching who you are, what your role is, and how you got into Overwatch.
Yeah, so my name is Izzy. I work for Cloud9 Esports as a team manager. I started working here as a team manager of the British Hurricane, which is the academy team of London Spitfire.
Awesome. And so how has that been? So what's really cool, before we get into like the nitty gritty of the Overwatch league news and 3-2-1 and ice cream flavors and all that stuff, I think it would be really cool to kind of talk about your job just for a second and how you got here. We usually hold that to the end, but I think it's really cool to talk about it now for you because you were there in season 0, right? You were there before there was an Overwatch league. And we were just talking and I was like, you were one of the first industry people, quotations, per our previous conversation, that took an interest in a lot of the stuff that a lot of the younger content creators were doing. And so I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for that. And number two, why? Right? Like, why go into this field, and how did you get into that team management role, into like where you are now? Because you've definitely gone through some growth over the last couple years.
So I started out in gaming and esports in general as more of a streamer, entertainer. I was working my day job in elementary school, and then in the evenings I streamed Pokemon competitively, which is pretty fun. Just doing like viewer matches and stuff. So I got an Overwatch beta key. I started playing Overwatch, tried to be a player, but then there was like this big hole of tournaments in Europe, and I really wanted to compete. I wanted others to compete, which I made friends with in the ladder at that time. So I reached out to a few people at DreamHack in Germany and looked for sponsors, found someone, and then did like a small tournament series called the Strivewire Monthly. So I tried to basically support the European scene because I was very passionate about Overwatch and I was passionate about where esports was going with it. And once that got rolling, I got hired by Blizzard for season 0, as you said, where we two met each other for the first time because of the week was just iconic at that point.
Appreciate it. I love the word. You're fluffing me up. I love it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so I started basically adminning tournaments, like running around telling team leads to get into lobbies and please be on time and report your scores. And that led to me getting familiar with the scene and getting familiar with all the Overwatch players.
Mm-hmm.
Since till they asked me to help them start a team because I was familiar with so many of them.
Well, that's awesome, and it's just really crazy. If anyone is trying to get a job in esports, you've really got to understand that you got to kind of make those opportunities happen for yourself, right? Every single time I've had someone on the show and they talk about how they got into the show, it was, well, I did this, I made this sacrifice, I did this myself, and I ended up becoming the person for this particular skill, and that seems to ring very true for you. But we'll get more into what you are like and what you've been doing lately, especially outside of Overwatch, in just a second. But let's talk about why most of the people are here. That's going to be what's going on in Overwatch lately. So first up is a big thing, and it's so funny because Jeff started this out by saying, "Please don't freak out." The name is in the card. I know it is called experimental mode, and so I'm just going to go on a little pontification. Experimental means an experiment, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to happen, right? But Personally, we'll talk about this a little bit. Why do you think the community jumped like that, right? It's a lot of people said, "Oh, just because it's in the game, like, should we put resources into it like we are?" What are your thoughts about it, just surface level, before we go any deeper on experimental mode and how they launched it in the client and what it means for the game?
Um, as for so many things of Overwatch, I think the community totally overreacts about it. I basically tell this every time there's like changes to contenders, changes to Overwatch League, changes to X amount of things on Overwatch, that guys, please calm down. Please get all the information first before you freak out about something. Like wait till there's like a developer update about it. Wait till like you see or like you hear what they actually want to do with it before everything is like doomsday. We have a community sometimes that jumps to doomsday scenarios way too fast and way too
Hmm.
frequently. So um, I
Why do
I
you
have my
think
own.
that is, though?
I don't
Like,
know.
why
Like
do you think it's so common?
everybody has like a different view on Overwatch and how they want the game to be and how they think the game succeeds, especially in times where like right now it's really hard to basically gasp where it's going, and we all wanted to succeed. We are really passionate about the game. Like the whole Overwatch community is super passionate about the game, not only for the gameplay but also for its diversity, what it stands for, etc., etc. There's like so many communities engaged by Blizzard by this game, and so everybody wants to, instead of pulling on the same string, everybody pulls in like different directions. And so it's
Mm.
sometimes really hard for these like certain groups to understand what other groups are trying to do, or if the game gets balanced in the other direction that is like so bad for X amount of players.
I think you actually said something that I haven't heard before. It's the strings all getting pulled at the same time, and that really, really rings true, because once they make adjustments on support, what happens? The string pulls on the other side, and all of a sudden we're talking about DPS for the next three patches, right? So, and everyone wants to pull as hard as they can, because it might kind of feel like survival, right? If you're not pulling
Yeah.
hard enough, you're
Mhm.
not going to get what you want, and so you push and push and push, and then I think that makes you more and more passionate. And then when you don't get what you want, or something like this happens and it's unexpected, and might hit a little harder. But let's talk about experimental mode in general. We talked a little bit about hero bands earlier and how that might make it fun. But what about this? If this were to go live, right? What do you think would happen? Is this something that you would like to see be explored further? Have you gotten to play it at all? What are your thoughts?
So getting to play that was a pretty interesting question, because at Hurricane we played triple DPS as one of the only teams in Europe before
Mm-hmm.
222 lock was on. So I think in the general thought of having a 1-3-2 meta itself is something that is definitely explorable. It makes the game fun, but also it gives a tiny dent in the competitive scene, because everything and everyone is like very set on this 2-2-2 mode, where you have like, look at Overwatch League teams, they've recruited off-tank players, specialists for those roles, and it's really hard to, like, the 2-2-2 lock is not that long now. Like we don't have it for that long, so
Mm-hmm.
it's really weird to see experimenting with like a different kind of lock. So I think it would make the game fun, definitely, but it would also like risk the career of some of these tank players, because you're basically reducing the tank slot to one tank. So every off tank has the opportunity to either go DPS now
Uh-huh.
or go tank, depending on what they're more comfortable with. And there's like so much less tank slots now that there's only one slot per team in a six-man team. So it will be way harder for these people to actually like grind and find teams.
So it was actually, I was talking to a friend of mine, not involved in the community at all, but I went to music school with this person,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like kind of just talking about it, and just to get to kind of like a general public's view of this, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes with us, we're in here, so and we hear the players
Yeah.
directly, right? Sometimes we might go a certain direction without seeing something, right? Because it's the glasses that we wear. And he was like, it's kind of like music, right? Are you a musician at all, Izzy?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I sing as a hobby, so.
Yeah, so it's kind of like when you have like an orchestra, right? DPS players are like violinists, right? There's like
Hmm.
30 of them in the orchestra, right? But there's also
Yeah.
way more of them like everywhere else, right?
Mhm.
And what you're is saying is like the off-tank player becomes like the tuba player, right? There's not as many tuba players, but there's only one. in every orchestra, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's almost perfect for this kind of situation, right? It's like the off-tank player really becomes the tuba player. You're fighting for that one spot, and it really, it really separates the fat from everything else that needs to be separated, right? And so that tuba player is gonna be the solo. He'll get everything he needs, but it'll take way harder because you got to be every other tuba player there. There's less room for it's less forgiving, right? As opposed to the violin side of things, where there's 30, you might be a violin in like the third row, right? And that's the DPS. And that's kind of how I feel in terms of stardom, too, the DPS. There's so many DPS players that people know, right? And there's a couple off-tank players, right? You know, your professional tuba player. You'll know more violin players. But what this would do, though, is it would push it more into that DPS category, which I think viewers find a lot more fun to watch. And I think, again, this is part of that strings coming across. It's, who is this for? Right? That's the other question for me. You know what I mean?
It's so weird to have the competitive scene being locked into this set thing, and then now, what are we like? For example, for us as a team, like, what are we doing with our off-tank player? Is the big question. Like, would it be better for us to recruit another DPS player? Just kick the off-tank player if this rolls around? Are we trying to let the off-tank player adjust? What if Jeff has another great idea where we play only one support? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's so weird to just cut a role completely from the game, which is so needed, actually.
It seems interesting to me that, yeah, it's probably controversial, but the fact that it's in here means that it's got some momentum, right? That it's something that they want to try. And I think you're right, though. It's interesting as to why now, in my opinion, as opposed.
It seems so short. It seems so like we just got the 222, and now we have a few months later, and we have the.
And as an organization, right? And just like you said, these are players that you're talking about. It might affect people that you sign. And if this changes every 3 to 4 months, right? I know that's not the goal, but if they're continuously trying to find what the game is, right, then you guys are going to have so much harder time being consistently good and consistent as an organization. And so that's my biggest concern with this experimental stuff.
I'm not really concerned about us as an organization. I'm more concerned about players, because it makes it so much worse if you're specialized in a certain role, and then that role gets cut off, you know? Like, for the tanks and support players, it's even harder than it is for like a DPS to adjust to different things, I think. Because you just have such a different mindset between playing DPS and playing support, or playing DPS and playing tanks. So it's just, I'm just very sorry for those players that get cut off from that, or that need to learn different roles, and in a maybe too short time frame, especially if you combine it. Imagine combining we're now 1-3-2 with the hero bands.
Like, now your tank player needs to play everything.
Yeah, we have to specialize so heavily in a certain thing in a short amount of time, where everything rotates. Like, imagine being an off-tank player, going to DPS role, like your team supports you as good as they can, develop you as a DPS player, and then the heroes you got at are getting banned, like 1 or 2 heroes getting banned, and then you need to learn a new hero, and then the next week you need to learn a new hero, and then you can maybe go back to one hero that you learned already. It's going to be so hard for them.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I think the last thing on this one is, basically this was the big thing here was trying to help DPS queue times, because it's been a big meme now that you can like solve world hunger by the time you get into an Overwatch game if you're a DPS, especially like a high MMR DPS player. And Jeff used this really awesome analogy about ice cream, right? And this analogy is used a lot when it comes to player choice. So basically, it's like, there are 3 flavors of ice cream that are the roles: strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate. The most popular is vanilla, right? So that's DPS. The vanilla line is really, really long, right? Should we try to get people to move from the vanilla line to the chocolate line, or should we just get more vanilla? And so this is getting more vanilla. I think maybe the next time they don't think getting people to move to the other roles is good for them, because that's not why they're playing the game, right? They don't want to play tanks, so why should they? And I appreciate that analogy, and it definitely simplifies the meaning behind these changes, but it does just feel like the timing was weird, right? We just had 2-2 roll lock, and I think this is just one of those things that makes you worry right? You might have a worry and you might have not been super worried. And when this comes out, you're like, why is everything continuously changing? Plus, Overwatch 2 is coming out soon.
The big question that I have with this is this also something that they want to implement into competitive play soon, or is this like competitive play as in tournaments, Overwatch League, contenders, etc.? Or is that something that you might have as a ranked mode? Like, I'm totally fine with like cutting down queue times of DPS players with like a ranked mode like this, where you have an event of, hey, this month was a 1-3-2 month, and this month was a 2-2-2 month, you know? That could be fun if that's a thing.
Yeah, and that would make each map that much more variable as opposed to general, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Macro Overwatch thing. So if you had your choice to do an experimental game mode, some that have been suggested is moving it to a 5v5. That 6v6 was a little bit of a gimmick, and moving it to 5v5 might be helpful. Even 4v4 I've seen suggested. Other things is adding different different game modes with different numbers of people.
Oh, okay.
So like in other games you'll have like a capture the flag, or like there's like 3 points you have to capture, or defuse a bomb, and those will have different roles and different people, and you cycle through each kind of map at like every round in an Overwatch League game, right? So people are going crazy, which I actually think that last one's
that's kind a bit much.
Yeah, but it's kind of like
the game mode that we have at the moment is so much.
Yeah,
so it would be a arcade thing, maybe.
Yeah, it would be like an all-star game thing, like the decathlon of Overwatch. But is there anything that you'd want to put in there in terms of something crazy or experimental that you'd kind of like to try out?
I'm boring. No.
That's
people
totally
are way more creative than I am, and that's why I'm not a game dev. So
all right, well, I can't wait to see what's next on experimental mode. If 132 is any look into what they have in store for this, I'm really looking forward to and very curious as to what's going to happen next. You never know, maybe they're just gonna take all shields out. It could happen. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about what's going on in the PTR. So PTR patch notes just came out, and couple things that I want to bring up. A lot of these changes are a little small. We got a Sigma buff, but the number one thing that we must talk about is that Mei, after somehow surviving the nerf hammer on 2 straight patches, finally gets a nerf. Izzy, how does this make you feel?
It makes me feel pretty good because many comps were so dependent on Mei the last patch or two, so it's really nice to see her getting more balanced and more of the immunity field Baptiste treatment, let's say. She feels a tiny bit more mellow and not like a must pick anymore, which is nice.
Yeah, you don't really want everyone to. I don't know if you saw that graph, but D.Va was in almost every single game in Overwatch League, and I think some characters can be in that, but once it becomes ubiquitous like that, you've got to start thinking
especially
about
especially with DPS characters where you have so much diversity in them. So you try to it should be a focus point to balance DPS champions rather than balance around anything else.
Especially if we're about to have 3 in a game. But anyway, cooldown for the wall is increased by 3 seconds. That is enormous. So that's 3 seconds in Overwatch is a lot of time, right? That can be the difference between getting on a point and not being able to contest, right? And so I think that's huge. In that 3-second window, so many things are going to be able to happen now. And now that the big heroes can actually go through the wall, it's not going to be, how many times, at least in my games, like there'll be a Roadhog and then the pillar will break and then we still can't get past the Roadhog because he can't get through the wall. So now this time he's going to be able to go through. And I think this just opens up a lot more counterplay, which is something that Mei didn't really have a lot of. The other thing here that I wanted to point out is Mr. Legs himself is going to get I think a pretty big buff, which is his Helix rockets are being, his cooldowns reduced from 8 to 6 seconds. So that's his final blow, right? That's how he finishes off kills. He's going to have it more often than not. So after looking at these PTR patch notes, anything, and I also wanted to show this bug because I think it's funny. So there's a Bastion bug on his brick skin that causes Bastion's bullets to grow inside after shooting through a Mei ice wall. And that feels like... That feels like that could have been exploited, and I'm glad no one found that out outside of the devs. But yeah, looking at the PTR, what do you think?
I think it's I don't think Soldier is gonna be buffed enough to be super relevant, but I think especially with hero bans coming in Overwatch League and in contenders, he's definitely up there when it comes to McCree, for example, being banned. Again, in situations and in different maps, Soldier will be a viable pick if Mercury's banned.
Yeah, I mean, there's always Nambani and there's always Hanamura second, right? That you can maybe push the Soldier through, but we'll see if that's gonna happen.
Soldier's a pretty big thing in ranked. I heard from my players.
It's a meme, man. Ever since that dev update, oh dear lord. Anyway, those players. But let's talk a little bit more about Overwatch League. Something that happened this past weekend was the Washington homestand. London, part of your organization had a couple big wins this weekend, so you guys must be feeling good about that. But that leads me to kind of think about, in contenders, there's a couple academy teams that do well. You guys are consistently pretty good. The British Hurricane, again, the academy team for the London Spitfire. Do you guys talk to them very often? I see that you're at the Cloud9 house now. Are you all there right now?
No, definitely not. Hurricane is very stuck in Europe, basically. So we all live remotely at our homes in different countries. And we don't have too much interaction with London at the moment. We're swimming them sometime. I'm trying to book scrims with them more regularly now that they're on East Coast. But when they were on West Coast, there was not too much interaction with them.
Okay, would you like more interaction, or is this kind of system working for you right now, right? Where you kind of keep the Spitfire as that like long-term goal, mentorship type of thing, and that you guys are working towards. Is that something that you like about the setup?
I think we make it work that we don't have much interaction with the Overwatch League team, but I would personally like to have more interaction with them. I liked it pretty much when we had talks or when we could play warm up for them or something like that. So yeah. I think it's a pretty big benefit if your academy team, your league team can actually like interact with each other. It doesn't even have to be scrims all the time, but also like having quote unquote a big brother in the other team that you can look up to, and then you can maybe talk strats about or talk about like different hero mechanics, like how do you play this, how do you play that, what are tips for this, etc., etc. is pretty nice. That's a thing that I really like living here in the team house, like in our headquarters in LA, is that the League of Legends Academy team and the main team are here together, and they always like can chat, they do team activities together, the top laners practice matchups together, etc., etc. And I think that's such a good thing to have if you have two teams that are basically on the same game.
I think you're right, because I think once you see those people that are like right next to you, right, and you're like, you're in Overwatch League and I'm right here, you're what's more motivating than that? Like you can see how close you are, right? When you're remote, it might not feel as close as it is, and I can actually speak to personal experience on that one, right? Like before I went out to California, I didn't realize, for my first season of Contenders, I didn't realize how much just being there would affect my career, right? And just being exposed to the possibilities of what this could be, right? Getting flown out to cast a video game, getting like per diem every day, right? And being in Burbank, which is like a super cool place, has some of the best, Hawaiian food out there. And so, I
need to come visit you sometime.
But just seeing those players, and then they get to go onto the stage and perform, and they get to interact with that. I would love to see more of that get set up in the Overwatch world. I think there still needs to be a little bit more time. I know Envy and Atlanta do it a lot. Maybe you guys could do it, or you're working towards doing it a little bit more in the Cloud9 organization. But I think you're totally hitting the nail on the head on that one. That mentorship, even if it's just big brother and just being there, it's so good to see them.
Even if it's just a talking point that you could have, it also helps.
Yeah, exactly. Or just walk through certain things, because the other thing that I think that's hard for players is there aren't that many people who understand what they're going through that aren't players.
Yeah.
Right. So if you get older players that have been through it to be able to pass on that advice, I can't wait till esports kind of has that set up. We're still, I think, growing into that point. I think we just need more people to get older, right, to pass that information on, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
All right, so the Spitfire did pretty good. Have you attended a homestand yet?
No, I haven't. Like, I'm planning maybe if the LA ones come up, but I didn't have time to go to one yet.
All right, well, the last thing that I want to talk about is Houston and Boston. Basically, the memes for this game were absolutely hilarious. Brennan Sideshow, hands in the head. The way I described it was it looked like two, you know how 5-year-olds play soccer? It's like really cute. They're not really good at soccer, but it's really cute because they're 5. Yeah, that's kind of how I thought about it. What about?
Nobody's really hitting anything, but at least they're having fun. I'm not sure if they had fun, but
But in terms of, I like to talk philosophically, right? In terms of like the broader scope of things, is this kind of content that people are putting out in terms of just like slamming the bottom tier teams like that, right? Making fun of them for their play. Is this good for the culture of the game so far? Is this something that either like, because for some people I think it kind of feels weird, right? But for me, I'm totally fine with the trash talk. Honestly, I could use more of it. But what about you?
I'm personally a big advocate of like rivalries, trash talk, memes,
Yeah.
and all the stuff. I think the Overwatch community sometimes, and I'm saying this, and I'm pretty aware of everybody watching here, is sometimes way too butthurt about things. Um, coming from me being a big fan of like fighting game community and also like League of Legends community, like MOBA and Dota community. There's always villains in these communities, and there's always the person that shit talks and then gets smacked in the head by a crab or something. If you know what moment I'm referring to with Hungrybox. And it's just fun. Like you shouldn't take stuff like this too serious. Of course, there's like boundaries and there's like stuff you shouldn't do, especially when it comes to like the very extreme stuff. But a tiny bit of shit talk doesn't hurt anyone. Teabagging doesn't hurt anyone. It's a video game. It's not like we visualize ourselves in it. I mean, there is a big principle of like visualizing what you're seeing and like putting yourself in the shoes of that, but I think it's a tiny bit too far if you go into saying, "Oh my God, he's like this character that is teabagging me is like sexually harassing me or something." It's we have to be sure that it's just a game, and even though much of the game reflects ourselves and our personalities and maybe things that we stand for as a person or as a community, doesn't necessarily mean we should put like all of our effort into like humanizing it too much.
You know, it's very interesting that you bring that up because I was thinking about that the other day. So there was a very, very, very big controversy because when VR was getting popular a couple years ago, people didn't think about the fact that you'd be able to touch things, right? So there is this archery game to where it was a really big problem where men in the archery games would like fondle female avatars while they were there. And I'm like, in my mind, that's a line. You know what I mean? Like that's something because it's VR, you're there. It's your point of view. You're seeing it, right? That's totally different than teabagging in jest, in my opinion. So I believe those fall on different parts of that line, and it's good to have these conversations. Exactly. It's good to have the conversations and understand that there's nuance, and none of this is all or nothing. And I think in the gaming community specifically, things are either trash or amazing. Right? You have to pick a side. Whereas I think if we could be a little bit more...
There's more nuance to it than just it being like one thing or the other. It also is very highly dependent on context. You can't just interpret context into anything. Like, for example, what if those two DPS players or two tracers that just dueled each other had like a tiny smack conversation backstage and you don't know about it? And they're like, ha, I showed you that I'm better than you. And then you teabag them as a... Because you can't just walk over to him and be like, "Ha, I told you so."
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing as when a UFC fighter knocks someone out and stands over their body, right? It's part of the show, and that's something that Overwatch League needs to be, a show. I want it to be more of a show. I have literally said the words, I want it to be closer to the WWE than the NFL, but I might be going a little too far on that one. Anyway, I totally agree. Nuance is very important to understand, but there's not a lot of nuance in staying healthy. Because Seoul just canceled their homestands because of the coronavirus in a couple weeks. The other thing that's been a little bit interesting and I never really thought about is some of these other bigger like conferences around the world are getting their like large gathering licenses revoked. So IEM not going to have you're not going to be able to attend. And there are a lot of people at IEM already that aren't going to be able to attend. And so basically the mayor of Katowice decided that it was too much of a risk to have that many people coming from all over the world to spread this. And again, the reason why I bring it up is just my opportunity to say, make sure to wash your hands, right? And to talk business a little bit, because I think something that we're all realizing is that this is not something that I think we've experienced in at least our young lifetimes, Izzy, it's something like this. We saw Ebola a couple years ago, but this is going to happen, is what it looks like, right? And number two is I was reading a bunch of stuff, and these are just things I didn't think about. Macau in China has lost billions of dollars already because they make all their money off gambling, and no one's going, right? Japan just canceled their school year in a lot of precincts, like the rest of the school year. And so I'm really hoping, right? I was thinking about contenders and I was thinking about LAN events and Overwatch League, right? I went to this like disaster scenario where it's like, it's not the devs. It's not these people. It's not the people who are going to be potentially killing Overwatch League. It could be coronavirus instead, because they're losing all of that profit on those homestands, that especially the top tier homestands that they probably expected to make the biggest amount of money on, that they were expecting in China and Korea. It's just a huge it feels bad, man. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think for coronavirus itself, the stuff that I followed, which was only like the beginning, I'm not like too aware of it right now, like how the death rates have grown or how like the spreading has grown too much. But in the beginning, it was like a very spreadable thing with a very low percentage of death, like a low death rate. But I don't know how much it's grown. Like I didn't pay too much attention because it doesn't like I don't want to get upset about events like these because there was SARS.
I remember in swine flu
in China too, and there was like the I don't know how they are called in English. Like there was so many like
bird flu, swine flu,
yeah, and we all survived that.
I got swine flu. It sucked. It sucked real bad.
It definitely sucks, yeah. But there's so many like, even if there is like events shutting down, there will be other events. People are just cautious about it, and I think it's totally fine if they make the business decision to be cautious about it.
Yep.
Everybody should stay safe. Health is very important. Like without being healthy, we can't do what we do. So.
Yep. So again, just PSA: if you're going to a LAN event, I know a lot of people just went to DreamHack. It's okay. You being in a mask is gonna hopefully keep you safe against pneumonia and things. Not coronavirus, maybe, but we'll keep you safe against a lot of the other things, and we'll look good on the gram. So
just wash your hands, your sanitizer. Exactly. Just be clean, and then you're good. And maybe fist bump instead of shaking hands or hugging. So
yeah, exactly. The elbow bump is what I like to
elbow bump or the fist bump. Just be
and before we move on to some lighter news, let's talk about the meta a little bit. So how are you feeling about it? There's been an all right amount of diversity. There's definitely 5 heroes that are getting played a lot, and then there were about, I think, like 4 to 6 heroes that were in like the 6 to 10% play rate. Do you want things to be a little bit more even, or are you hoping that the meta stays the same?
I'm always a big fan of like having diversity and having not only hero diversity but also like meta diversity. So, I think the meta's in a decent state. Like I don't have big opinions about it because I'm like just the manager. So. I just make sure my coaches are comfortable and in figuring out the stuff, but I think it doesn't matter too much like how diverse the meta is at the moment, because hero bans are gonna come in soon, and that will diversify it no matter what. I think that the changes that were made, like we as a Hurricane, we're pretty comfortable with the meta right now, and we will be comfortable with other metas because we have great staff to work with.
I wonder if the hero bans are all just going to kind of ebb and flow to the same like 5 bans every other week, right? And we'll just get 2. Yeah. So like we'll get the 10%. So say D.Va's banned one week, won't be banned the next week. Then D.Va will be banned again. It's kind of like what I'm thinking. So there actually might be a possibility that it's not as variable as people think. I think it might be.
Diversified, but more. So more champions have like this 10% threshold that they need to ban them.
Yeah. And so I think like there could be a possibility where it's just kind of like, this is, some weeks are dive weeks, some weeks are bunker weeks, and it's not going to be like, oh, but this week's going to be super crazy. I think it'll kind of cycle through like the big 3, right? Brawl comps, dive, and maybe a fancy schmancy one, but we'll see what goes on. But I've liked it so far.
I think they're going to be like some set archetypes of comps, and then you just switch out depending on which hero is banned. Like there will be a dive archetype, there will be a slow archetype, there will be a pharmacy archetype probably. There will be probably more like a long range kind of fight archetype, snipers probably archetype, and then you just mix and match on which heroes are banned or not.
Yeah. I'm actually pretty excited to see like how hero bans are in like 3 weeks to really see the effect and how variable the meta is for Overwatch League. We don't know for sure if hero bans are going to be available in contenders. That would require a totally separate set of stats to see if what those play rates are. Maybe they'll just go with Overwatch League play rates, but we shall see. They might fall under some different rules. Let's go ahead and move on, though, for the sake of time. Jake got a special announcement today. He's going to get his jersey retired, which is moderately funny for a lot of us who've been following sports for a really long time. I'm like in the middle here. Jake has been a stalwart of the Overwatch community for so long, all the way back when it was like Jake Train and Vol on LG Evil on Contender Season 0. Yeah, exactly. They did quad tank first. Jake on the Roadhog. Remember that?
Do you want to know a fun fact?
Yeah.
I played in a tournament where we played finals against Bird Noise. It was like a Halloween tournament in 2000. Was it 2016 or 17? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Bird Noises were one of the first teams to do quad tank Moira, and then we had to cast it forever for that tournament.
It's their fault.
Yeah, like Horizon Lunar Colony just came out, and they were doing like the Moira quad tank, just like roll and Moira Sombra quad tank. You just walk onto the point A. Man, it's crazy to think how far strategies have really come. But what do you think about this, right? So in normal sports, in traditional sports, it's very common for like Michael Jordan's number to get retired after 20 years, or Brett Favre's number 4 for Green Bay, or something. Unfortunately, if their lives end sooner rather than naturally, right? That's when you'd get a number retired. The league's been around for a couple years. He does have about a year and a half of previous play. Do you think that this is warranted? Do you think that this is a little forced at all?
It all seems like a tiny bit early. That's the only like issue that I have with that. For the Spitfire one, I can see why, because they won like the first season thing. But I'm not 100% sure if we should make this like a regular thing just because someone is a personality in Overwatch and was a player before.
Yeah, you gotta keep.
I'm kind of on the fence of that, because I'm also not. I didn't grow up with like much traditional sports, especially not like the Americanized ones where they actually do retire jerseys. So I don't have a really big opinion about it. But for me, as like a bystander, it looks like very, very rash.
It does. It does. I understand the decision behind it. Like, I get it, right? But again, like, I just think sometimes Overwatch marketing just doesn't understand optics, right? They're like, we think it's cool, and then they announce something, and they're like, oh, we did not think that was going to happen, right? Yeah. And so I think Jake has been, especially in the early days, was one of the most important people in Overwatch. Remember when he was writing articles and was like talking to the IOC, and now he's a caster. He is a big part of the culture. I just hope that they're not trying to do like forced novelty on these things, like making his number a collectible item, forcing that a little bit, kind of like iPhones do. That's the one thing that I don't want to happen. So we'll see.
Definitely not.
But the Spitfire did their thing too, but they won a championship, right? So that I don't know. Let's talk about Mardi Gras.
That's what I'm saying. It seems like out of proportion a tiny bit because with traditional sports players, it's also that they like have to achieve something really great to get retired, right?
Yep. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Mardi Gras. This was leaked a little earlier, but the other thing that we have to know is that you're going to be able to get sprays in the skin by participating. Ooh. Mardi Gras, super fun. Are you giving up anything for Lent?
I mean, yeah, maybe.
Oh, man, I don't have the self-control to do any of that, but I'm definitely going to be able to watch some things, and you're going to be able to get drops through the Mardi Gras event by specific streamers. Fingers crossed some more streamers get included in this than some of like the stalwart ones. There are definitely some up-and-coming ones that I hope get showcased a little bit later on in their careers, but that's going to be our news section today, which all of a sudden I feel like comes to an end. We talk about Mardi Gras, now we got to talk about you, Noukky, because this is called, wait, that's not Overwatch. And the reason why I call it that is, I say it every time. We talk about Overwatch all the time. Noukky, I don't remember the last time, outside of maybe when we talked about keto a year ago, the last time that we had like a non-Overwatch related conversation. We're people. We have other interests. What are yours? What is something that like really like either calms you down, but it's something that you can really get lost in? What's a passion of yours that might fall outside of gaming and Overwatch?
That's a really tricky question, because I I just moved here and I didn't really find like my niche yet. But back when I was living in Germany, I did singing lessons for, yeah, once a week basically. Like music in general, I play guitar, I play a tiny bit of bass, and
Nice.
music in general is like one of my passions, which I'm following and trying to use to calm down and like get more collected.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, who was your musical influence? Like, who were the people that made you want to pick up these instruments?
Oh, that was during my complicated teenager phase where I was some kind of mix between emo goth and punk rock. So can you imagine me with like spiked
So,
bands and,
okay,
and
that's
eyeliner?
so
Just
funny. I have a theory. I want to do like a legit like thesis on I
hmm
would 100% believe that emo, punk, and scene kids are more social and emotionally prepared in adult life than
because
most
we were so
other
emotionally
kids.
unprepared as teenagers.
Yeah, because you guys were so sad and like talked about emotions and were like healthy about it, right? And so I'm pretty sure you guys are like some of the most socially like and emotionally intelligent people out there. I like swear it's a thing because my husband was the same thing. Like seeing pictures of him from 15 years ago is nuts, right? Because he's got the dark black hair, the one nail painted, right?
No, not the one nail.
Yeah, eyebrow, and I would have never dated him if I if he looked like that when we went on our first date. But he is so like solidly good in that department, and I really think it's because that music really talks about emotions and letting your sadness out. It's really I joke, it's a little bit in jest, but I'm actually serious about it. So I think maybe that's
Yeah,
why you're so solid of a person, is he might be the music you listened to back in the day.
maybe. I'm not sure.
Well, that's great. So, who would you have said would be your like favorite artist that 15-year-old Noukky was listening to?
Linkin Park definitely
Me
was my
too.
biggest influence. Yeah.
Oh, rest in peace. That was my snowboarding mix to the end of time. Still will be. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's
Still,
always
still,
great.
still some of my go-to songs of karaoke.
Oh, same. Crawling, I'm crawling in my skin. Um, uh,
You're not
Usually
gonna
20
get me to
beats of
sing
the
here.
heart is mine. I know, right? But that's awesome because I was a music major, so I totally understand the whole music thing. And if you're playing bingo at home, Chris mentioning he's a music major, you can go ahead and mark off that space.
Let's do
Um,
an esports band.
yeah, exactly. That would be so cool. I got the tuba. I can play piano too. You can get the bass or guitar or both at the same time. That might be the APM would need to be
Oh.
high, but I think we can do it.
Probably, yeah.
All right, but let's talk a little bit about you now, right? We've already started doing it. We talked a little bit outside of Overwatch, but let's talk about your career in this world as we get to know you a little bit more in your world of gaming. So let's talk about
Mhm.
the intro. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning, so a little bit of a Spark Notes version here. What got you into just gaming, right? Even before Overwatch, like who were your influences? What were some of the first games you played? How'd you get Noukky from Izzy, right? How'd you get here?
So gaming in general started pretty early. My biggest influence was probably like my school friends that I made, which started gaming, which like it was a typical like he's gaming on his PlayStation, I'm sitting beside him just watching and like helping him out with quests like, hey, you need to click this, hey, what if we try this, blah blah blah. We started with like storytelling games.
Mhm.
Um and then we moved over to multiplayer stuff. We played like Pokemon Stadium together. We played
Nice.
Mario Kart together, like all the Nintendo stuff. I was a
Uh-huh.
Nintendo kid. I only had Nintendo consoles.
Hmm.
And my friend had all the PlayStations and Xboxes, so we just shared time on those.
Cool. Well, that's handy.
Yeah, it was pretty nice. And then I think the start of like going competitive in gaming, I actually got with him, like from him, because we played
Mhm.
Super Smash Brothers together, like very competitively. We got
Nice.
really mad at each other all the time, and that's where my
That's so funny.
passion for fighting games comes from, also.
Nice. I have a
Um,
really big passion for fighting games, and I don't think I ever knew this about you. Fighting games were like the first thing I ever played on my Sega Genesis, man, in the boomer days. Yeah.
Boomer days, yeah. No,
Yeah.
Smash is a really great passion of mine. Like, I love watching Smash tournaments. So it's my go-to esports whenever, like, I don't know which esports to watch. Ace, there's Smash tournament up right now. Um,
That's fantastic. And so, who do you main in Smash?
oh, in the recent games, I was an Ike main.
Oh. You're a sword user.
And before I was a Zella slash sheep.
Okay. That's okay. The swords, not so much, but Zelda and Sheik, we could talk about that. I've been a Jigglypuff main since Melee, so I hate my life apparently.
I love Jigglypuff. Jigglypuff is love.
Yeah, well, it's just funny because like she's so low tier. It feels like, and when you win with her, it just feels that much better, right? It's like when you win a game with Torm. Let's talk about how you played RPGs, you got into Smash, and so now we talked about how you got into this gig, right? You knew all those people, but one thing I want to talk about, it was like one of the sweetest things, and I think the Overwatch community can get a little crap about being negative or sexist, but when Susie left C9, one of the coolest things was I saw 20, 30 people just tag you and say, this person should get this job. And look at where you are now, working for the same organization. And man, what was that like? That's got to be either, like, if my husband would probably be like, that would have been the worst moment of my life. I hate receiving compliments. I would have really just rather gotten the job. Or that would have been like, that would have made me like, oh my God, they really like me. They really like me. Where did you fall on the side of that equation after seeing all of that support?
It was a really two-edged sword because on the one hand, I was really, really glad about all the support I got. I'm not even sure if it was when Susie left. I think it was when Kate left Washington.
Oh yeah, yes.
That's the correct timeline.
Yeah.
I was really happy about like all the positive comments because I was trying to get into Overwatch League for the first 2 years now. And I was still a tiny bit disappointed from the first season and the second season interviews that I had, and I didn't make it. And I was like, yeah, what is wrong? What should I do better? I think Hurricane is working actually pretty well. Like, why is nobody like considering me? And so it was a really big morale boost. But on the other hand, that I didn't get that job still made me feel like super bad because there were so many people supporting me and so many like positive comments where I was like, oh no, I'm disappointing like all of these people now. Like they want to be there so bad and I just can't do anything about it. And so yeah, it was really double-edged, but I'm pretty happy where I am right now. Like I'm super glad that Cloud9 actually like gave me the visa, got me over here, gave me more teams to work with and believes in me. So I don't really mind not being in Overwatch League at the moment.
Cool. Well, I mean, you're still working with potentially with some. Yeah, exactly. And you'll get there eventually. I know it for a fact. If the fact that you're still here, right? The fact that we're both still here after all this time, right? You've got the drive. It'll happen.
Something that maybe disappoints you now is I don't want to be in Overwatch League anymore. Because you said you're gonna get it, and I'm like, no, I really don't want to. I don't want to be in Overwatch League anymore.
Why?
Because I think where I am right now, like just doing general esports and like working with so many more games, more teams, more players is actually where I want to be more than just working in Overwatch. I think I want to, like, my first goal when I started in the space was I want to be like a Swiss Army knife where I know so many roles and like know so many games that I can just be a general like manager kind of type. And I think I achieved this goal of Cloud9 way better than I would in Overwatch League.
Wow, it's so well thought out. You're very smart. Anyway, so before I feel even less about myself, when I talk to people like you and some of the other guests on the show, I'm like, man, these people really have a good head on their shoulders, and these are the people I want to be leaders in our community. You definitely fall under that. And if you're ever my boss one day, I'm going to be the captain of the B squad, that's for sure. Anyway, so...
We're going to bring back the Boop of the Week.
Yeah, let's do it. And so let's talk about a little bit more about your job. So you said it's more general, right? You're a team manager. What would you say is your, like, most important task? Like, do you do staffing decisions, or is it more making sure your players are healthy and happy? What would you say is your most important thing that you do in your role?
So for Hurricane... where we work mostly remotely, I think the biggest part of my job is the staffing decisions, like making sure that they have coaches they can trust, making sure the coaches do their job, the players feel like cared about, even if we are not working with them directly. And I think in general, now working with other teams, basically being the one that is able to keep up communication between them and keep up communication between like all the different parts of like everything that is important in an organization, like the social team for content, the video guys, the announcements, everything, like just being the middle point of everything. So the machine runs smoothly is something that is the most important thing, like being able to communicate well.
Yeah. So what's kind of like a surprise of the job then? Something that you maybe didn't expect to be on your plate every day that's here now. And I say that because I like highlighting gigs that aren't on camera or playing for the camera in esports. I think when people think about working in esports, they only think about casters and players. And so there's a whole team of people behind, like you said, social media, the C-level staff, and everyone else involved in creating an esports organization. So that's why I like highlighting roles like yours. So you talked about
you talked to light up this a tiny bit.
Yeah, don't worry about it. You talk about what you expected, but now coming into a role like that, what didn't you expect? So if I was trying to find a certain role that I could kind of get ready for it, if I interview or might get the gig.
That's a pretty hard question. I think the most thing that people are not super prepared about is that you have to be like many people go into team management because they wanna help players progress, and they wanna basically push them to a certain thing, like help them get better teams or help them achieve like tournament goals. But they are not really ready for also the downsides of this, like being the one that needs to slap them on the wrist, being the one that cannot be like, as a manager, you cannot be like the best friend of them and be the good guy all the time. You have to be the bad guy sometimes, and you have to push them to be better. You have to be like the one that's fighting them, the one that's like punishing them sometimes, so they get like better people. And one thing I wasn't like super prepared that Hurricane prepared me pretty well for was like discussing stuff with them, like
like having those conversations
and pushing for those conversations. A thing that I really like to do, that is like my secret tip if you are a manager, try to make sure, even if you are the same opinion as a player, be sure to argue against it for the first few minutes, so the players can be sure that they really want what they're asking for.
They believe it. They believe what they're saying. I see what you're saying. Playing devil's advocate.
Even if you tell them afterwards, I'm totally with you right there. Just try to push them to really argue about it, not just be like, I want this because X, and then it's done. Like, they need to be really sure about how they want to progress, how they want to criticize, and etc. etc.
Well, yeah, and if they're being, and this works both ways, right? Because it could definitely be helpful, but if they're being dicks, right, and they can't defend that part of it, right? Like, it's okay to be passionate, and sometimes it's okay to be mean, right? But if there's no, like you said, intent, and if there's no big reason behind it, then that's where we have to have those conversations. Then you're just being mean to be mean. It's like an alpha power play, right?
Definitely.
So that's cool. I like that. Like, having them be passionate about their ideas and their successes and their failures and talking through that. That's great, especially for younger people moving into the world that have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think you're setting them up for that success. And so the last thing on this section, there's only 2 more questions, right? So the last thing I want to talk about on this one is you're saying that, like, okay, you help the players feel good. You help the players feel healthy. What about you? When you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling like you can't take it anymore, right? Who's there to help you? Who's your team manager?
Oh, that's my general manager. That's Galen. She's the general manager of Cloud9, and she basically takes care of us. Like, she yells at me when I don't take off days and when I work on off days.
That's awesome.
She actually threatened to come over to my apartment and unplug my internet if I don't stop working on my off day.
Well, I'm glad you've got the support of the higher ups. That's awesome that you could even, and just like the way you're talking about her.
That's a good about the like, we take care of each other.
That's so cool to hear. And like, even the way that you're talking about it, I could tell, just like the way your voice sounds, the way you're telling me the information, that it's a great relationship. And you should be sure to take some time off. It's healthy. You might be able to do it now, but when you're 37, it's going to be a little different.
I'm a German. I'm all about efficiency. You know that.
That is very, very true. Anyway, Noukky, thank you so much for joining me. I always love talking to you and getting to know you. And for those of you at home, this is really funny. This is actually I think the first time in 2 years that Izzy has
no.
talked to me sober. I'm me being sober. So when I go to like when I go to like conventions and stuff, I go kind of hard, and it's the only time of the year I drink. But the only time I see Izzy is at these conventions, so she thinks I'm an alcoholic, I'm sure. Because the first time we ever saw each other in person, I got off the plane for BlizzCon. I drank a bunch of scotch, took a shot, and went to Roscoe's Chicken, and you were there, and I was.
Yeah, we had chicken and waffles together, and you were so drunk.
I was by far. I was like inappropriately. I was way.
Oh yeah, he was very touchy.
Yeah, I love hugs. I'm definitely like a leaner. Like grab the shoulder and lean. But it's just funny that we actually get to have one of these conversations where I'm not like jazzed because of something else, right? That we get to talk about Overwatch, we get to talk about it person to person with clear mind, soft heart, hard spirit, as I like to say. But the one question I like to say to everybody now that story time is over is why Overwatch? Right? You talked about Smash, and you've been in the Overwatch community for a very long time. Why? Why Overwatch? What makes you so passionate about this particular game?
I think because it was it's a combination of I always liked Blizzard when I was younger as a company itself, because I liked like the core values that I have written out somewhere. But also, I really fell in love with the game when I played it in beta, and it was the time of my life where I really wanted to go somewhere and where I really wanted to pursue esports. And I thought that the best way of doing this is to become a player, which is like the general thought that you have as a kid. Like, if I wanna do something with video games and I'm really bad at like programming, I should probably play video games. So that was just the game that I felt best in to go pro, because it was something really fresh at that time.
Yeah, and
I just grew to love the scene. Like I grew to love all the players that I met while playing in high ranked in beta and in season 1 and stuff. And so I just carried on with them, and I wanted to make sure that they have content.
Nice. Well, that's wonderful. Once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love catching up with you. Love talking Overwatch anytime. I always I like randomly message Noukky like once every 3.5 months, starting conversation about like something random, whether it be like what I'm eating or complaining about something. But one thing is for sure, you are an amazing part of this community. I cannot reiterate that enough. You have been personally supportive towards me more so than a lot of other people, and I owe you a lot. You might not know how much of a positive effect that you've had on me in general. Knowing that I've had your support has mattered a lot to me. So personally, from me to you, I would love to thank you for being there the whole time, helping me through a lot of that stuff myself. So thank you. And now, before I shed a tear, tell me where you can find yourself on at Twitter.
At Twitter, I'm just at Noukky, just Noukky.
All right. And when is your contender season going? Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I have an Instagram where I post what I'm cooking up for my roommates, and also sometimes very nice dog pictures of the pets I'm living with.
Oh, nice. Well, I mean, if you're in the mood for dog pictures, that's definitely going to be a quick follow.
He's so cute.
And tell us a little bit more about the Hurricane and when we're going to see them next.
So Hurricane's going to play in the contender season this year, in the first contender season. I think it starts in 2 weeks, but you can follow us at Hurricane on Twitter and see everything that we're on about.
All right. Well, I've been Chris. Boopasaurus. You can find me at Boopasaurus Rex on Twitter. This has been Overwatch Lately. You can follow the show at Twitch, at twitch.tv/UGC. You can also go to UGC Studios on Twitter at UGC Studios to follow the rest of our shows. We've got a ton of different content. We got new shows coming up. League of Legends might be coming up here soon, but a lot of content around Halo as well. Also follow UGC for all your Halo and other esports needs. There's going to be a breakdown of news there sometimes, a lot of tournament news, and a lot of our favorite personalities do participate in a lot of UGC tournaments as well. So give them a follow along with everyone else that's a part of this broadcast. Thank you to our producer cast. I have been Chris Boopasaurus Lessard, and this has been what's been going on in Overwatch lately. We'll see you next week.